All right, welcome everybody. I know that we're kind of shuffling in. We've got a few people that are logging in. I can see that already. So we're just going to take a little bit of a minute here before we get started. Want to say thank you for, depending on what time zone you're in, coming and spending a little time with us this evening or late afternoon. I'm still in coffee mode. I'm on the West Coast, so it's not quite evening here yet. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome our audience and thank you all for logging in with us today. My name is Mandy Now, and I'm the Executive Director of Health Professions Week. I'm excited to welcome our moderator and our panelists this evening for what I envision will be a wonderful discussion. I do want to let you know that you are all in listen mode and that we will take questions from the audience via the chat or via the question panel, whichever one you prefer. If you hover your pointer over the bottom of the webinar screen, you'll see the chat icon appear, and you may be able to submit your questions there. Feel free to post your questions when you have them, and what we'll do is work them into the conversation. Please remember to be respectful and kind and address our panelists with their preferred pronouns. It's my pleasure to begin by introducing our moderator this evening, Dr. Love Anani, who is the emergency room physician by professional training, as well for the Tour for Diversity in Medicine mentor. He's got his t-shirt on tonight. I love it. Welcome, Dr. Anani. We are thrilled to have you here today, and I'm excited to meet everyone.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to not only our panelists, but to everyone out there. As it's been stated, we will definitely work in all of your questions. Please keep them respectful. And I think that's enough of an intro for me. I do emergency medicine. I work with the Tour for Diversity, a nonprofit that's here to diversify medicine across the spectrum. So I'm ready to talk.
Awesome. Fabulous. All right. Let's meet our panelists. And I'm going to say this. We are, in this COVID era Zoom society, we all run into our challenges from time to time. So not every panelist is going to have their web camera tonight. And that's okay, because we're going to have a great conversation regardless. So I do want to start by introducing Christina Aponte, who is a non-binary and transfeminine and uses she, they pronouns. They are a chiropractic and naturopathic medical student at the National University of Health Sciences in the Chicago area. Their clinical interests are chronic pain, transgender medicine, and mental health. Justice Erickson is a final year student at a final year naturopathic medical student at Bastyr University. They have been a strong advocate for inclusion of trans and non-binary experiences in their medical curriculum from day one, successfully advocating for the construction of 2 new all-gender accessible bathrooms on their campus in the first year, contributing to the curriculum in their program all the way through. They are passionate about competent primary care for gender expansive families, especially around fertility and family building. They live in Seattle with their fiance and their 9-month-old antigender child, number 2, expected in April. Sami Ebner is a current naturopathic medical student, also at the National University of Health Sciences in Chicago. Sami is a non-binary trans man who uses they, them pronouns. They are a naturopathic medical student and a practicing doctor of chiropractic. Sami plans to use both of their degrees to help the transgender, gender non-conforming community access affirming and trauma-informed care. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Anani, I am going to have you take it away.
Thank you very much. Those intros were wonderful. And it's just a reminder that we have great panelists here. To all the panelists, thank you for joining us. I hope you're ready for an open conversation. I know we have many people in the audience along the spectrum of not only their gender identity spectrum, but also along the spectrum of where they are in school, from high school all the way to college and to graduate students. So we're gonna have various levels of discussion. I will obviously state here that I did not introduce myself in the pronouns I prefer earlier. I go by he, him pronouns for anyone in the chat box who types that there. But hopefully with the panelists, again, if any of the questions you don't feel like answering, you don't have to. And I warn you all, if there's a pause for too long, I'll just call you by name. So the first question I'd like to ask, open-ended to any of our panelists. going as personal as you feel, when did you feel you became aware of your non-binary journey and you knew it was going to be something you were going to have to work on in a professional aspect?
I'll go ahead. So I actually figured out I was non-binary throughout chiropractic school, and that was I had graduated in the beginning of 2020 when the pandemic just started, and I came out about after the first year. I kind of knew it was going to be tough in the environment that I was in, and the school had never had a non-binary student come out um, during the program, and so I kind of knew my challenges, but I also knew my resources. So that was important. I knew I had people there that were going to support me, and I found those people and I stuck with them. They helped me. They were staff, they were other students, and um, it's really become a really great journey. And I could see it transform just from the beginning of coming out socially and then choosing to medically transition and then just seeing how that went along. And by the time I graduated and entered naturopathic school about 3 months later, I was again doing the journey, but as how I wanted to present. And I felt a lot more comfortable doing that. So
That is a great answer. Thank you. The one thing I definitely took away from that was support was critical. And hopefully everyone else out there took that point. Any of our other panelists, I'd love to hear the beginning of your journey as well.
Yeah, so I've been at least vaguely aware that I was non-binary since high school age, but didn't really feel like I could claim that identity. I felt like, I have to like claim my privilege and whatever, and I didn't feel like it bothered me enough that it counted for a long time until I was in college and had more trans friends. I went to a college with a really high percentage of trans folks, Hampshire College, and my trans friends were like, yeah, no, it definitely sounds like you're trans. You're allowed to say that you're trans, actually. And I was like, oh, cool. um, but it's always been the case for me that, I always knew I wanted to have my own kids, like give birth to them myself and that kind of thing. And, I didn't want to not be femme for the rest of my life. And I learned that that didn't have to be how that works. Um, so I'm actually pretty like gender fluid, almost like bi-gender, where my gender kind of shifts over the course of a few years. And so actually right when I started naturopathic school, I got really into like a masculine phase. And for the first entire year of naturopathic school, I showed up in a suit and tie every day, to the point that it became very much an expectation. And the first time I wore like leggings to school, people were like, "Who are you?" And I was like, "Let me live my life." Um, but yeah, so that was the thing, and I started tea while I was at Bastyr in my second year, and that was a whole journey with just all of the medical transition going on, and going through puberty while trying to be in medical school was a lot. But I had, there's a lot of people in my school that have good intentions but really have no idea what they're talking about with a lot of trans stuff, and so tended to stumble over things and forget my pronouns and not know what kind of a question is a respectful question, that kind of thing. So it was pretty exhausting to have to educate all the time. But I had a few friends, there were some of my guy friends that were like, "Hey, you're one of the guys now," and like really like welcomed me into the kind of like masculinity club in a way, which felt really nice. Um, and like doing physical medicine in particular, I remember phys med labs being like a nice space where like some of my teachers would be really affirming and just be like, "Hey, I can tell you've been working out," and whatever. It was nice to get to like have a little bit of that experience into that world that I had been shut off from for the rest of my life. Sucks that I had to go on T to access that, but it is what it is. But yeah, so overall, I feel like I've had a pretty good experience with it. And then the past couple of years, I've been shifting femme again as I have kids and whatever, and people have been really understanding about that, and mostly have remembered my pronouns now that we've been in school together for 4 or 5 years. So yeah, that's great.
Well, I'm glad to know that you most likely won best dressed in your first year. I don't see how anyone can beat suit and tie every single day. And for all those in the audience, again, one thing I know I heard and picked out, it was the same for me. College is a great place to explore whatever spectrum you want to be on. The college I went to actually had a gender and sexuality center. And I was like, what do you need a center for that for? And then when you start exploring that space, the reasons and the discussions, it's very eye-opening. Christina, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and share. Yeah, so my journey's been pretty recent. I came out as non-binary around March of this year, and I started medical transitioning pretty soon after. Yeah, so I've been on estrogen for about seven months now. Before that, I identified as a gay man. I came out as a gay man when I was 15. That label didn't really sit quite right. Like, I had a lot of the gay friends. A lot of the people that I gravitated to early on were more queer, and they ended up, like, a lot of them, like, being trans. So I thought that was kind of like an interesting foreshadowing for what was yet to come. And I always felt there was a sense of like, well, there's like something that's not quite right with my gender. But I didn't really realize it until like pretty recently. And it kind of came to the point where I was like, oh, I like really can't ignore this anymore. I need to do something about it. So yeah, I've been transitioning while I've been a naturopathic medical student. That's been pretty interesting. It's been hard in a lot of ways. Like, estrogen brings out a lot of like emotions, and it's been a lot of tears, and yeah, it's like in puberty. So it's been challenging, but it's been good. I've surrounded myself with really good people, and it's made it a lot better. But it's been a lot of learning, a lot of because I was never particularly like feminine as far as my presentation before that. So I felt like I had to basically learn like how to be feminine, like how to present femininely within. It felt like a crash course. Like, within a few months, I had to figure out like makeup and like meals and all this stuff that girls who are born cis or cis girls, like, they already get that by being like who they are. So yeah, that's it.
Again, that underlying tone and theme we've heard of support makes everything so much better. And I must say, pun intended, it's very nice to know amongst our panelists we have a spectrum of the spectrum, from high school through literally a couple months ago. It's very interesting. And I think will help everybody. Again, you can shoot those questions in the chat box. Make sure they can identify where they are on this journey as well. Now, I ask this question again to you all. Sometimes, especially in the US, we tend to affirm our specialties and our jobs close with our personalities. Do you guys feel that along this journey to becoming a naturopathic medical student, and getting into the medical field, did you feel there was a sense that you were doing it for the trans community, you wanted to help the trans community, or is that something you found out during naturopathic school that you knew you could use this degree to help others? And anyone who would like to go.
I definitely went into school knowing that I wanted to help the trans community, and as well as some other marginalized communities that I'm a part of, like the disabled community and neurodivergent and all that, as well as just like chronically ill, and a lot of that stuff overlaps with the trans community hugely, of course. And so seeing like how my peers were struggling so much, and even how I was struggling to access medical care that understood, who we are, what we need, treated us with respect, all of that kind of thing. It was, I don't know, it felt impossible at times to find doctors that really understood it, let alone were open to, maybe not always pharmaceuticals or any kind of additional treatment modalities beyond like your most straight line medical MD kind of protocols. So I really wanted to bring, accessible medicine that really serves folks like me who have similar struggles. So I'm excited to finally be able to do that. Now that I'm seeing a bunch of patients, it's really rewarding.
Thank you. Christina, would you like to share?
Yeah, when I started naturopathic medical school, I really didn't have the intention of like necessarily specializing in like trans and queer medicine. That was definitely something that I was like, well, if I have like trans patients or queer patients, like I'll be open to seeing them. Like I was very much kind of like, I'll just like see whoever. I had no intentions of like specializing or anything. But now with where I'm at with my journey and like all the knowledge that I've accumulated, like doing my own research for my own health, I feel like it would be almost like a waste if I didn't really put that knowledge to use, because I know with myself and like my providers, like I feel like I'm very much the one running the show, because I feel like I sometimes know more about like obviously like my own body, but sometimes just about like other ways to do HRT than what my providers know. So I very much want to offer that to other trans patients, and just having alternatives, and also yeah, like addressing like the general health side, which is what naturopathic medicine excels at.
I will definitely say it's very true. And to anyone else along that journey, I would say in 2021, the average patient uh, along the trans journey is going to know more than their provider. I'm not saying they happen all the time, but I would probably lean and say the average. It tends to be a collaborative treatment if you don't go to someone who specializes in that. Some of the physicians and people out there, luckily, when they know what they don't know, refer their patients to either endocrinologist or specialists along those journey paths. And if you feel like you're not getting the care you need, just make sure to seek out those paths that are available to you. Moving forward, my next question, I'd like to start with Sami, because obviously people hear medicine, everyone thinks MD or DO, but obviously we have 3 students on the ND path. How did you decide between that path? Did it just fall in your lap? Or did you think something specific about it?
So for that, since I did my Doctor of Chiropractic first, it was a lot easier for me to get my naturopathic degree after to be able to do what I wanted to do, which is trans medicine. And I actually found naturopathic medicine when I was about 18 or 19 years old, and a lot of medical doctors were failing me as a patient. And I had found that just very simple things like nutrition and other things made my quality of life way better. And I wanted to be able to help my patients on that level. And naturopathic medicine does way more than just diet and lifestyle things, but it's kind of like our core principles is we use our determinants of health, and we get to spend a long time with our patients. We get to really know them, and that's what I really love. I love how like maternalistic, as well as it's naturopathic medicine is like automatically trauma informed. And then it can easily be inclusive if you have that open mindset. And it just kind of encompasses all the things that I want to see in the world and I want to help people with in the world. And so that's why I really love the medicine. And I just want to help other people know it as well.
That is an excellent point. I must say, from a personal level, whenever I have to recertify in America trauma life support, they do not add emotional trauma, physical, physiologic trauma, or even mental trauma in there. And maybe we should have a different course about that. So you and I can talk about that, see if we can raise some money from there. Justice, you have seemed in some of your answers to have known where you were going along your journey, and probably started on the earlier end at the end of high school going into college. So how did you make that decision between ND, MD, and DO, or other specialties in general?
I've actually known I wanted to go to naturopathic medical school since I was about 13, around the same time I was, determining things about who I was in the world in general. I actually went to a alternative to high school where all the teens were unschooled because we, the traditional schooling didn't work for us. And so I had a really awesome mentor there that was teaching anthropology and whatnot. And he had a lot of specialized knowledge about body work and Chinese medicine and just alternative medical modalities from around history in general. And so we did a lot of deep dive independent study together. And I remember talking to him one day after reading Between Heaven and Earth, which is like a very basic text if you've ever like checked out Chinese medicine at all. And I was just like, what if there was a medicine that was like all of the really awesome natural stuff, but also everything we know about scientific medicine? And he was like, actually, that's a thing. It's called naturopathic medicine. And I was like, yo, sign me up for that right now. And so I started taking college classes when I was 15, getting my prereqs out of the way for pre-med, and um, ended up graduating college at 20 and get to best year at 20. So I've been on this path, and it's still just as inspiring to me. For a lot of those reasons, I love what you guys were saying about how like naturopathic medicine is like by default trauma informed and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly why I love the medicine.
That is really, really big. And something you said makes me want to like shift gears to a question I hadn't even thought of until you just said it. I was having a casual conversation with someone earlier today, and I was just coming back from my college, and I realized it seems almost second nature compared to when I was in college, 2003 to 7, to now when you introduce yourself and even in your email signatures to have your pronouns there. I would say it's very like in college, it's automatic. Students would say, hi, my name is XYZ. I go by, whatever pronouns they decide, and even in their emails, that's what I see. A question I have for you guys that you hinted on, Justice, is some people's journeys start in high school, and some schools in high school are now taking on that mindset. Do you think that's a good time to start it there? Do you think it's very open? Do you think every school has a structure for that? And do you think that's a safe place to start a journey, or is college just much safer?
I don't mean to hog the mic, but I think it really depends on where you are. I was lucky to be in Western Massachusetts, which, I was one town over from Northampton, Massachusetts, which has the highest concentration of lesbians of anywhere in the world. And so the queer community is just very present in that space. And Seattle has a little bit of a similar vibe where there's a lot of queer folks because it's an urban center. So I would say like if you're in like a progressive city or something, then yeah, I've been seeing, a lot of the young people I know, a lot of the high school students that I mentor and whatnot are having a really easy time coming out at school. And they don't even feel like they necessarily have to blaze a trail because a lot of Gen Z people just get it, and it's not necessarily the big thing that it was when I was in high school or middle school. But then I also know that there are folks in more rural areas or more conservative areas where it's still absolutely dangerous to come out in high school. So I think it's a really case by case kind of assessment, seeing like, do you see other out queer folks around you? Do you feel like people would be receptive to that? And if you're wondering, you can always test the waters, like just, say a couple things in a class, like advocate for the existence of trans folks and see how people respond. I would say is like a good way to do that. But yeah, you got to see how your own environment is.
Very good answer. Christina, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what Justice has said. For me, like with the high school that I was at, like I really couldn't imagine doing like what I'm doing now. Like it was kind of a hassle to even have like a pride club or whatever. So yeah, a lot of that kind of discovery for me started really like in college and even now like in grad school. Because I mean, I lived in Texas my whole life and I live with my family. My family tends to be more on the conservative side. So I think those kind of things matter definitely, like where your location is and just like the general vibe of whether it's more like liberal or conservative. Yeah, I think it has like a really big factor. So yeah, it's hard to say, especially when you know at that time and you don't necessarily feel safe to like really explore it like in an open way.
It's always good to have personal experience. Those are both great answers. And an obvious question to anybody who's just looking at the screen, we have two people who go to the exact same school. So a question I know I had when I saw that amongst the panelists is, Was there something special about the schools you guys applied to? And when you guys were looking at schools, did you spend time looking for the factors you just mentioned? Student-led groups, openness, diversity statements. How did you go down that path when applying to school? And we can start with Sami for this one, but I do want to hear from everyone.
That's a hard question for me, because for going from one degree that I already have and going to another school, I was looking for the way I could do it the fastest and the most financially ability for myself. And the school that I went to partnered with the school I'm going to now. So they made a bridge program, which made it an easy choice for me as someone that already had a lot of loans from a previous doctorate degree. But when I was looking at my chiropractic school, I definitely looked at the location of where it was at. It was in Portland, Oregon, where I knew that I could be myself, and I knew I was close to people that if I needed to get out of the school, I would have other queers and trans people around me that I could find support with. And that was really important to me, and that's why I chose to go to Portland.
Very interesting. Justin, would you like to go next?
Sure, yeah. I think one thing to note is that of all the naturopathic schools, as far as I know, every single one of them is in a pretty liberal city. So, it's like, choosing between Seattle or Portland or, Chicago. So you're going to have those good urban centers where there's going to be plenty of queers around. With the exception of, I would say, Bridgeport, Connecticut, which can be pretty darn conservative, but Bridgeport is closed as far as I know, or at least isn't taking new naturopathic students, so that wouldn't be a concern anymore. But yeah, so I definitely took into consideration that Seattle is a good place to be queer, but it wasn't as much of a factor as it would be if I was looking at a different school, for sure.
Interesting. And Christina, would you like to round out the panel question?
Sure. So I picked national because my original grad school plan was to be a chiropractor. I was going to the school in Dallas, wasn't really feeling it there, and I just felt like I had to do something else. And I came here because there's both a chiropractic and a naturopathic medicine program, and it's pretty easy to combine the two. The other thing is a few of my friends from high school who are both trans, they live in Chicago, so I was like, okay, I want to go somewhere where I know people and I just in case I need support and stuff. So yeah, those are the main two factors. And yeah, being close to a larger, more liberal city was a big factor for me.
I'm a very big theme person, and I'm again noticing a theme. I wish I can add my own special effects, just the word support going across the bottom of the screen right there, because it seems very important. So anyone out there in the audience, whatever school you decide to go to for whatever reason, support. We've heard financial support, and one of the responses we got, we heard physical support, we heard emotional support. So just support. Again, if there is a special effects person for Explore Healthcare Careers, support along the bottom of the screen. Speaking of support, a question I have for everyone is how you supported someone else while in your journey in school. I know a lot of times students get to go in the room first and can leave the room last when meeting with patients. So if you guys have any uplifting stories of a time you either went in a room and made someone feel more comfortable, corrected someone above you on pronoun selections, or just made a visit all around better for anybody, I would love to hear any of the stories. Anyone who'd like to go.
I've been out for 8 years now, so I think in trans terms that makes me a trans elder. You know, and so I've just had I've been really fortunate to be able to mentor a lot of folks who are coming out more recently or trying to navigate new spaces with their gender and whatnot. Mentorship is just one of my favorite things in general, whether it's professional mentorship or queer mentorship or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's been big at my school. Even, yeah, I tend to organize the Trans Health Month events at my school, or at least help do so. There's more and more people involved, which is great. But every year I do a panel of trans people who have gone through some amount of medical transition, talking about what it's like to be a patient with trans healthcare. And it's like a very like ask us anything kind of a panel. And so it gets very, very vulnerable. And I had several like staff members, other students, all that say like they felt comfortable like claiming their identity after seeing us getting so like real and in the weeds with it after that panel. So that was really meaningful, knowing that like I was actively carving space for other folks at the school, even if they weren't necessarily on the student end. So that was really great. And you know, I have like the moments where I worked in the library as a work study student for several years, and one of my friends came up and was saying like, I was like, oh, what's your name, to check out the book. And I always ask last name first because I know first names can be dicier in systems. And you know, they're like, you know, Weber. And I was like, I see your first name isn't what I know you by. Do you want me to just change that? And they were like, yes, please. And I was like, no problem. I'll just change it in the system. Like, there you go. It was just a really good moment to just be there in solidarity with them and make space for them.
I love that. I would like to hear an answer from one more panelist, and then I hear we have a great audience question to ask next.
I'll share. One of my recent favorite things that I've been doing to help support folks is actually working to train my colleagues. So I've been doing presentations within the clinic to help, you know, just 30-minute, 3 sessions every trimester to help train my colleagues so they can better serve the trans community. Because a lot of these folks are going to go to small towns where they might be the only doctors that can supply this kind of care. And appropriately, or more appropriately, I should say. So that's something that I've been kind of trying to push myself to do more, and you know, really push my colleagues and challenge them and get them to feel comfortable with the trans community so that they can make a difference, even though that they're cisgender.
On behalf of your colleagues, I'm not sure if they said it, but I'm gonna say thank you. Lots of snaps. I am sure you're not gonna know this now, but one of those sessions is gonna help inform one of your colleagues who may help someone and save a life 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. You don't know. So if you need any kind of virtual kudos to continue doing what you're doing, please allow me to give that. Thank you. Exactly. All right. To our student question from the audience. Please, Mandy, fill us in.
All right, we've got a couple of good ones in here, but the first one, I'm just going to read it. To any panelist, how do you deal with those patients, coworkers, classmates who aren't necessarily understanding or accepting of non-cis people? Is it something that occurs often? I am entering medical school next year as a non-binary student, and I'm anxious about having to deal with defending my identity on top of all the other stressors that come with medical school. Any advice?
That's a great question. This is one of those I would like all of our panelists to answer, just because the more perspectives, the better, especially for a student like this. So again, 2-part question. Have you had to encounter any patient that was not, I guess, comfortable or liked where you were in your journey? And how often do you think it happens? Was it one time, or do you think it happens once a year? To anyone who would like to start.
Unfortunately, it happens quite a bit. In my chiropractic program, it happened a lot more. In the naturopathic program, it happens less. The thing that I always try to use is positive reinforcement, because I know those people, I'm not going to change those people's minds if I go at them in any kind of negative way. Obviously, there's a point where you get pushed to and you're just like give up on them and you might get rude or, you know, and then there's always just being really tight with student services. I have no problem if I hear anyone even remotely with a homophobic or transphobic joke. I'm taking them to student services to have them talk to you because they're going to be a professional. And to be a professional, you need to know how to help all communities and talk well about all of them. And so it's a growing opportunity for them. And so I always encourage people, if they ever hear anything like that, to make sure that they help other folks have those opportunities, because it's only going to make them a better doctor in the end.
Excellent, excellent. Justice or Christina?
For me, like I haven't started seeing patients yet, so I haven't had anything there. But as far as colleagues, especially since I've started transitioning, like in the middle school and people like kind of knew me differently. I mean, a lot of it really, like I haven't had any problems with anybody in particular, but it's more just like awkwardness with like, I feel like a lot of people don't really know how to like interact with me or like approach me or anything. Um, I mean, that's like really it though. But, I mean, people have been nice, but I fortunately haven't had any situations yet, like knocking on wood, where I've had somebody be like directly rude to me. But I mean, my part of it too is just like knowing that student services is there and to just like let people know that you're not going to tolerate any like rudeness or like rude remarks or anything like that, because there's protections in place to deal with that if it happens.
Excellent. And Justice?
I'm so glad that NUHS is doing so well. That's fabulous. I don't hear much about you guys at school, even like when I go to A and P and stuff. So really glad that you guys have that. And the student services resource sounds great. Best year should have that. Unfortunately, in the beginning, it was really hard for me. It seems like at Best Year, with every single class, there has to be a big learning process, especially through the first couple of years. For whatever reason, we tend to have a lot of folks that are from a more conservative background, or just have never lived around queer folks before. Just don't have any exposure to it. And so it's a lot of those really painful early conversations with folks where they just don't know any better and will say all kinds of things that can be really insensitive. So yeah, for the first couple of years, I think every single class I was in, I was, arguing with a teacher or arguing with another student saying, like, you didn't include trans bodies in this, or you didn't say that in a gender inclusive way, or, you just really said something offensive about non-binary folks or whatever, or like forgetting that intersex people exist, all that kind of stuff. And I really burnt myself out like every day doing that. It took a big toll on my mental health, just being like that person all the time. And I had to step back from it after a while. After my first 2 or 3 years, I stepped into other forms of leadership. I got into NMSA and legislative stuff, which is the Naturopathic Medical Student Association. So I just started doing other things, and that helped sort of redirect some of that energy where it wasn't always, me putting like my identity and my body on the line, and was still able to be like a really visible person at school that people could come to if they had questions or needed support. So I feel like that was a good strategy, but in the end, I think it really did pay off. I'm just starting now to see my colleagues in person again at our grand round classes, and realizing like, oh, all of those trainings I did with you for years and years, all of the ways that I changed our curriculum, you're really putting that into practice. And it's been really awesome to see that they are much more trans competent. They don't stumble over their words every time they say AFAB or AMAB these days, and they know what the difference between sex and gender is, and they don't flip out if a patient is on HRT and try to make the whole case about that. So yeah, I'd say it comes up a lot, but it's also rewarding in the end.
Thank you for that answer. And the same thing, again, support to that student that asked that question. I would just make sure whatever school you go to, I will throw it out there now. Unless you are a cisgender billionaire Caucasian male, you are probably at some point, unfortunately, you may stumble across something that either make you feel uncomfortable or just isn't right, and you need to know who to talk to and who to report those things to. I'm not saying you have to go there every single day, but you don't want to find yourself in that situation and then be flipping through the student handbook on day 337 or something. You should start from day one, and they should teach you that in your orientation. So I hear we have another great question. You said there were two, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's take a
We've got a couple here. So the next one I'm going to ask is, again, to all panelists. Did your experience as non-binary help you to find people who are also non-binary? And did you write about these experiences in your applications?
That's a good question. And I'm assuming based off the question, we're talking preschool, not preschool baby, but you started your naturopathic school in like a personal statement or something like that. So yes, any panelists who would feel comfortable?
Yeah, I think since I started naturopathic school, since I've transitioned and came out as non-binary, I did put it in my application. When I was applying to the school, I made sure to talk to the president of the school and talk to him about things, how they were going, because it was during the time when our previous administration had removed gender identity from the Discrimination Act, and I was so stressed out. I was like, are you going to follow suit with this? Like, I wanted to know I was going to a school that was going to be accepting of me. And so I, talked to admissions. I talked to the president. I talked to other students at that school. Sorry, am I answering the question the right way?
I think you are.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, so I did write in my applications, and I didn't want to hide that because I don't want to go anywhere where I'm not accepted and I can't be myself. That's too important to me right now. So
I love that. I honestly love that. Would anyone else like to state if they wrote about where they were on their journey at the time to applying to school, and if you met someone who made you comfortable about writing that before we started school?
Yeah, I can't really answer that because it started while I was in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No problem. All right.
I don't honestly, it was 5 years ago. I don't remember what applying to ND school was like. I remember crying. That's about all I got. I think my essay was good. I don't know. I got in.
Trust me, essays are difficult. Tour for Diversity works on personal statements all the time. And let me tell you, I've read quite a few, and I can understand why people cry. Any other questions from the students?
Yeah.
I can mine.
Yeah, so, okay, this one, and again, I'm going to address this one because this is Health Professions Week. So we have a question from the audience that wants to know specifically, what's the difference between naturopathic medicine, osteopathic medicine, and allopathic medicine? And I know just enough to be dangerous, so I'm going to let y'all answer the question. And if I need to, throw in some resources to the chat, I will.
I will let anyone on the panel take the naturopathic, and I will take the allopathic and osteopathic. I've answered that 100 times.
I think my naturopathic medicine elevator speech is pretty good at this point. So naturopathic medicine works by a few different principles, but one of the biggest things is really, as I said before, incorporating natural therapeutics in with modern medical science. We are trained as primary care providers. And, at least in Washington, we have full scope of pharmaceuticals and even minor surgery and all of that. So we get all of that basic medical training. And then we additionally study homeopathy and herbal medicine and physical medicine modalities. So we'll be doing, adjustments similar to osteopaths and chiropractors as well. And we just bring all of that into one cohesive set of principles. I actually have the therapeutic order on my wall. I don't know if you guys can see it over there, but it's a set of principles where we say, you want to start with establishing the foundation for optimal health, and then you want to stimulate self-healing mechanisms, support and restore weakened systems, address physical alignment, natural symptom control, and then synthetic symptom relief and high force intervention. So really trying to start at that foundations of health. What can we do with your diet? What can we do with your sleep, if it's appropriate to do so? But some situations call for a high force intervention, and we're trained in knowing exactly what's appropriate at what moment.
Allopathic medicine is your standard old school MD that does the spectrum of primary care all the way up to specialized care. In that specialty, we do learn about the whole body and the whole system and how it works together, but we do not incorporate as much as the natural into it. We are taught it, maybe like a semester or two, but we are not taught from day one. Day one, we are taught to analyze, diagnose, and treat, right? So I tell people, cough, make sure it's not pneumonia. If it's pneumonia, antibiotics, kind of move on. That's your general allopathic mindset. That's how it works. Of course, if someone brings or requests alternative therapies, we're supposed to know those afterwards, but that's our primary mode of thought. Osteopathic medicine, DOs, are under the principle that the body can most of the time self-regulate, and their medical specialty is to try to help the body to regulate its symptoms prior to going to the allopathic route afterwards. Again, antibiotics, so on and so forth. Osteopathic medicine in their tenets also has included what has been deemed manipulation to help the body either adjust itself or formulate itself in the right position or place to overcome those things. So using the cough again, is it all right, you're having bronchospasm because you don't cough well and you cover your cough, or you arch so you can't get full expansion of your thorax? Let's help manipulate, open up your thorax, deeper breaths, practice that. And then if that else fails and it's just pneumonia, here's your antibiotic. Osteopathic physicians can do anything an allopathic physician can do, any specialty, any job, any DEA degrees. In fact, last year, 2 years ago, one osteopathic physician had the limelight as the physician directly to the president. So again, no harms or bars there. I did MD because that's what I knew, and that was the path I wanted to go down. I will not lie, my eyes have been open to these other specialties. And again, follow the one where the tenets match what you want to do and you will be happy.
I forgot to say the crucial words, healing power of nature, which is very much like what naturopathic medicine is based on. So we also follow that principle that the body mostly knows how to heal itself, and we just have to kind of, get obstacles out of its way.
Excellent. Any great student questions?
And our audience member says, thank you. That explanation was very helpful. Okay, so I'm looking at the time. I think we probably have time for maybe one or two more questions. So I'm just going to kind of throw that out as a little time reminder. I have one more great question in the chat, and then I think I'll toss it back to Dr. Anani to round us out. So the last question from the chat is, do you have any advice for having an effective conversation? I think maybe we need to put that one in quotes, an effective conversation with people who are ignorant to issues surrounding non-binary and trans identities.
Great question. I'm going to ask if Sami can start with this one, because I believe they had a great point when they were talking about, approaching people before and, coming at it from a positive attitude, or positive limelight, I believe is what was said. If you want to reiterate that point, and then we'll go ahead.
Yeah, so positive reinforcement, so is usually what I use if I notice, so if the person's already being ignorant, a lot of times what I'll do is actually use myself as an example, if I feel safe. So that is definitely if I'm feeling safe, I'm like, this is what I go through, this is how I've been treated by my doctors, and this is what I have to do when I go to the ER, and not tell them that I am trans just so I can get healthcare without being asked questions or whatever it might be. I like to do that, so it kind of opens their eyes and makes them have to kind of empathize with me a little bit, and then I can help them start breaking down those things, and then once they start to get it, that's when I use that positive reinforcement instead of kind of making them feel bad if they get the things wrong. And I found that because I coach, so that's usually how you get kids to remember to do the things that you're trying to teach them, and even, you know, adult students as well. If you're going at them with a positive reinforcement, they're more likely to be accepting and get it right the next time. So
That's great. Would anyone else like to state how they like to approach that topic or those types of patients?
Yeah, I mean, I think trying to keep it positive is definitely a big one, because if you start off by you know, criticizing someone, telling them what they're doing wrong, they start off in a defensive place. And I have to admit, you know, like, I'm a fairly confrontational person by nature, and so I've been having to learn how to kind of like dial that back so that I can have a more effective conversation, and not just have people shut off at the beginning of it. So yeah, just trying to redirect it and trying to like correct people in a compassionate way. Just be like, hey, just so you know, like, my friend doesn't use those pronouns. Here's the pronouns that they use instead. Like, and offering just like constructive suggestions for how they can, you know, practice pronouns by, you know, talking about, you know, I would suggest like just talk about how great your friend is, and like practice practice using their pronouns that way, or even like talk to yourself in the mirror about it. And so I've learned some of those like little strategies over time, to help people with whatever piece of it they're struggling with. But I think also keeping in mind like the theater principle, like yes and. It's saying like, I hear what you're saying about that, you know, maybe they're trying to make a point about physiology or something, where they're like, oh yeah, but physiology works this way, and I'm like, yeah, a lot of the time it does, but also in, you know, a trans body or an intersex body, it might actually function in a different way. And just adding in that additional knowledge, or saying like, you know, also these kinds of people exist, and face these kinds of problems, tends to go over better.
Thank you. All right, I'm aware of the time. So I always feel like every panel is better. It's like a fun question in there. So I have one fun question, and if we have time left, I guess a nice wrap-up piece. So my fun question to every panelist, and I'll give my example as well, is can you name one pop culture reference, whether it's a moment, a show, an episode on the show, a song, etc., that you think moved the culture forward in terms of shining lights on the non-binary / transgender community? I will give an example, and I'm sorry if I'm stealing anyone's example. I love superheroes and comic book shows, so I watch Supergirl on the CW. And one of the superheroes is actually transgender, Dreamer. And they have lots of storylines and issues about that. And they talk about pronouns and everything else and how she grew up in her family. And it's very, very great art. I'd recommend to anybody. And to me, that was very interesting to see such a character moving the conversation forward on literally primetime TV. So that's mine.
I'll definitely say Pose. I hope I didn't steal that from anyone, but I think that show's so important because it really highlights like the struggles of like Black and Latinx trans women, and they face the highest rates of violence. And I feel like the show portrays them like in a very like human, like kind of relatable way. So it's, yeah, that show is amazing. I think everyone should like check it out.
Love that show on FX, if no one knows. Any other panelists?
I think mine, you know, since this is a health professions thing, I'm gonna go with the Grey's Anatomy moment. And in the latest season, I won't spoil anything, but there is a non-binary doctor that's introduced. And I think one of the biggest things that's starting to happen in media that didn't exist before is it just being casual. You know, this doctor just gets introduced and everyone is using they, them pronouns for them, and it's not weird. It's just, you know, cool. And one of the other doctors like instantly has a crush on them because like they're really hot and really interesting and really smart. And they don't make a thing out of like, oh, like, but isn't that character straight or anything? You know, they don't like get into this whole like, oh, everyone has to question their identity now and like talk about it. Like, it's just how it is. And so I think that's really awesome. I was really excited to see someone with they them pronouns on Grey's Anatomy. A couple seasons ago, there was another trans character that was also pretty fabulous, but having an actual non-binary person is great.
I love that. I also love Grey's. I'm not caught up on this season, but one of the things I think Grey's does well, I think pop culture knows it for medicine and sex, quote unquote, but I actually think they do sexuality pretty well. Again, one of the doctors in this season, literally at the start of their arc, had a one-night stand with someone of the opposite gender, and then like 3 episodes later realizes he is gay, and there was like no big thing about it. It's like, all right, boom, that's where we're going now. And everyone just understood it. It was common, and that person's had a very good arc as well. So that's great. So that just leaves you, Sami. You have to see if you can pick up your pop culture reference.
Oh my gosh, I'm so bad with pop culture. I'm actually like a jock, geeky jock, so pop culture doesn't really speak to me very much. But the one thing that I will say is Queer Eye, and just for the fact that they put people on there and they also put other queer and trans people, which helps open the eyes for like your Midwestern mom that watches that show, you know, and the fact that it can reach more people that are conservative. Just because it is on, like, I don't know what station it's on, honestly, but maybe like ABC or something. Yeah.
I think it used to be on Bravo back in the first iteration of the show, and now I agree. I'm not sure which channel it is on. I think it's streaming for sure. Everyone should go look it up and find out. But for anyone in the jockey theme, I will say if there's any jock sports realm that takes gender and sexuality the most serious, it's easily the WNBA, in my opinion. They have, some great players who are very open about where they are in their journey. Obviously, all of the quote unquote macho male journeys sports are coming along in that sense. And I at least take what the sports people say to want to back up these communities very seriously. If you follow sports, there's a very big story in the NHL right now about someone who was, abused in that right by someone, and they're actually talking about removing this person's name from the Stanley Cup, and that's a big thing for anyone who knows the Stanley Cup. Your name's on there forever. So if they're serious about that, I think it's a very big jock way to support where people are along their journey. All right. We have 2 minutes. Do we have time for one more question or time for wrapping? I don't want to get cut off.
Yeah, I'm sorry to do this. This has been such a great conversation. So Dr. Anani, Sami, Justice Christina, I am so thankful that you all have chosen to spend a little bit of time with us. The stories, the insights, the obvious passion for what it is that you do. Dr. Anani, I'm going to ask you for just a couple of closing remarks. I'm going to put up a new slide, and then I've got a couple of things to send us on the way tonight and get everybody wrapped up.
All right. In closing, again, thank you to all the panelists. Your courage, your openness, coming out literally on a platform that is going to be, displayed on the internet forever is really amazing. And it's really going to help a lot of people, and it's really going to educate a lot of people. Even myself preparing to be a moderator for this panel, the education, the thoughtfulness that I had to think about before coming on here was really inspired by all of you. So thank you. To all those in the audience realm, please continue to use all the resources, Health Professions Week, and the health professions in general. And obviously, Tour for Diversity in Medicine. We're on all social media platforms with that moniker, Tour for Diversity.
Awesome. Thank you again. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate our audience for the great questions and hanging out with us tonight. We've talked about a lot, and if you're interested in learning more about careers in naturopathic medicine, we've heard about chiropractic care. We discussed a little bit of the difference between naturopathic, allopathic, and osteopathic medicine. And if you still have questions, you're welcome to reach out to Health Professions Week, and we will help put you in contact with the appropriate staff. Additionally, if you're interested in learning more about the Tour for Diversity in Medicine, you can also reach out to us, and again, we will help to funnel your questions appropriately. More importantly, though, and maybe a directer way to get your questions answered, if you have not yet registered for Health Professions Week, please take the time to do that. We still have 7 more days of fun events and activities, and you are all welcome to join us all week long. November 10th, which is next Wednesday, is our virtual career fair, where you can meet with representatives from the American Association of Naturopathic Medical Colleges and the Association of Chiropractic Colleges, and the Tour for Diversity will have booths at this event, as will the AAMC, which is the American Association of Medical Colleges, and ACOM, which is the Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. So you can come and get all of your questions answered simply by registering and then planning to attend the virtual fair, which is on Wednesday, November 10th. You can get questions answered about careers, shadowing, and all of those kinds of great things. So we also have a lot of free videos on YouTube. This video will be posted to YouTube, hopefully within about 24 hours. So if you want to come back and reference anything that we've talked about tonight, you are welcome to. So thank you again to everyone. This has just been a fantastic evening, and so I appreciate all of you so much. All right, and with that, good night, everyone.